space is one which they are quite marginal to. What's your analysis of this?
Is there an Islamophobia? You know, in the West we talk about Islamophobia a lot. Bangladesh being a Muslim majority country, is there an Islamophobic discourse amongst the elite, or amongst, what I mean by the elite, amongst the newspapers who claim to be liberal, or amongst what you call, Islamophobia, does it exist in Bangladesh, especially amongst the so-called quote-unquote liberal discourse that dresses it up in
Bengali nationalism, the narrative is an Islamophobic narrative. Okay, all right. So, I'll tell you one thing. Then, before I just enter the culture question as you are really addressing it, many of us they don't know. In 1971, we fought for 3 principles according to the Proclamation of Independence. Is that equality, human dignity, and social justice. This is what is enshrined in a Proclamation of Independence. Okay. Now these 3 principles has been completely overruled or completely eliminated in a way, and came up with Bengali nationalism, which is ethnic racism. Okay. Number 2 is secularism, which is nothing but Islamophobia, because it's not a secularism of the Western Enlightenment type. It's a secularism brought in essentially to undermine Islam, essentially to making Islamists or the Islam as the prime enemy, because Bengali nationalists, then their ideological narrative and the political interpretation of the Bangladesh is this: in 1971 war, Islam has been defeated. That is the narrative. Whether they say it clearly or not, it's between the line. That Islam been defeated in 1971, and that's the reason we came out to the Pakistanis, and many of the intellectuals, they write, is that Bengali Muslims have eventually came back to their root, came back to their home. So that means you talk about Islam, is you are leaving your home or your real address. So by becoming Bengali, you gave up Islam and you have become a Bengali. So these are narratives replete in Bangladeshi literature. If you read any of the so-called famous novelists, you'll find out it's replete with Islamophobic and often very racist narrative, saying that the 1971 war was between the Bengalis and the Punjabis. It already is a racist narrative. We never fought for the Bengalis and the Punjabis. It was not a war like that. So that is the dominant narrative in the Bangladeshis. And secularism, why I say secularism is nothing but an Islamophobic notion, is partly, it's very simply, democracy, when you talk about democracy, democracy is already a secular state. Okay? If you have a secular state, you don't need secularism separately to talk about that. You have to have another principle called secularism. So, by simply accepting secularism as a separate project apart from your democracy is nothing, because you see you see the Islam as a problem, and you use the secularism as a weapon to lash Islamic values, or as the words you use, Islamic identity. So Bengali nationalism is nothing but a racist Islamophobic ideology. I'm sorry to be so harsh. And all the problem we have right in Bangladesh after 42 years is because of this. Because we have the Chakmas, I'm not talking about Muslims and others, but the Chakmas, we have the Mandis, we have the 27 or even more local indigenous groups. So they are not Bengalis. We have Urdu speaking Bengalis as well in Bangladesh, so not only who supported 1971 war. So Bengali nationalism unfortunately was a very racist discourse to start with. And this discourse produces Islamophobia, produces a kind of a hatred to Islam. And that is the tragedy of Bangladesh. But at the same time, this ideology succeeded not because it is in the heart of the peoples of Bangladesh. It has been artificially created, and that is very clear in the 5th of May, that it has been artificially created by urban middle classes, who to them, they thought that they are, by being Western educated, they are becoming civilized, and Islam is a medieval religion, so any identity with Islam is something that you have become very medieval and you're not modern at all. So this is still the dominant tendency. Even the most of the progressive, I'll give you one example, you'll be quite shocked to see. The communists of the Bangladesh, their main enemy is who? They're talking about the class politics, but they don't do the class politics. Their main enemy is Islamists. They think Islam is the main problem. You see, students' union is one of the wing of the Communist Party of Bangladesh. So they recently, last year actually, they came up with a demonstration. Especially, I think that it is a convention or conference or something like this. So here you see in the Michil, when they do the rally, one woman with shiru in here, and with a, what do you call it, placard saying that she is Hindu, is Hindu in Bengali. There is another one who is a Buddhist shaman, and she is Buddhist. Okay, so it's he is a Buddhist. He is wearing the dress of a monk, and then there is a big what they call monster sort of thing behind them. Okay, it's a very ugly kind of creature, and it's written Islam. Okay, all right. So, and Islam is a problem for the minorities. Islam is a problem for the society. Who is doing this? It has been done by the Communist Party of Bangladesh. So, this is somehow the left movement of the Bangladesh. It was partly because this communist ideas came to Bangladesh through these Hindu nationalists who previously was a terrorist. I'm not using this word in inverted commas, I'm using it's colonial term, but they used to call it, but they believe that they are going to emancipate India through the military means, through their force. And they used to go to the Kali's Mandir, is a temple of Kali, and they used to give their blood as a kind of a promise. So it's a very communal kind of practice. And this is from there, they eventually become communists. They are not communists just because they are following the Western Enlightenment, and Marx, they haven't read Marx as an Enlightenment project, that not as in the continuation of the Kant, Hegel and Marx or something like this. It is not to them. It is to them is a kind of a very petty bourgeois socialist idea, a very funny and bizarre idea of nationalism and the nation. And nation is mother, is a goddess, is a mother. So this is still in Bangladesh, where they sing Rabindranath Tagore's national anthem. So it's the mother. So your nation is symbol is the mother. So it is there. And then any other cultural possibility or any other imagining of the community apart from the imagination which this upper caste Hindus has thought about is absent in Bangladesh. I haven't seen anybody's negative. Okay, and even for me, when I write poems. I'm quite well known for my poetry. So you couldn't even use the word of from Arabic or the Farsi. All right. This woman called Tasima Sen, she wrote to me that if anybody read my poetry or my writings, then they'll come up with the talwar, say, and then all the Maulavadis, fundamentalists will come and they're going to, kill us. So that means using the Arabic word, the Farsi word, or any of the legacies of the Islamic values, any of the legacies of the Islamic imagination, any of the Islamic metaphor and others, has been suppressed. And you don't see the young kids when they're writing. I wrote one of the book of poems called Ibadat Nam. I don't know if you've heard of it. Okay. So, and then when this book was being published, then my friends, who are a very good friend of mine, and they know that I have done some experiment with poetry and struggling how to include the Islamic culture or my family's imagination. Because I grew up in a Muslim family, so obviously many words and everything will come automatically into my language. So I tried that. But my own friends who know it very well, Marxist background and my Leninist background, didn't accept it. They thought that using Ibadat Nama was very wrong to them in their eye. Why should I use Ibadat Nama? And it's very Islamic, very religious kind of language. So this is, it still prevails in Bangladesh.
If we could talk a little about the dangers in speaking out on national taboos and the situation in Bangladesh at the moment.
Like as I'm talking about right now, is it?
Yes, and you'll go back. There was an incident earlier when you were speaking on the television about, you were surprised that the public hadn't responded to the media more physically beforehand, and this was spun into big danger. Undoubtedly, such a environment awaits you upon your return. If you could just reflect on that, and you see ways out of it.
This situation, obviously, the media, barred me. With one section of the media barred me. And it's partly because, obviously, I see the role of the media is very negative, and I say this pretty clearly. But the way they've distorted, in one of the talk shows, when they're talking about the media's role, is clearly it's been distorted. Because of course I do say that you go and bomb the media. You see that what they have done, they have, actually the way they agitated the people, the way they have hurt the feeling of the people. So obviously what they're facing it is the result of what they have done. But I added very clearly, I am the person who doesn't want to at all even to say anything in the media, even to throw a stone at it. I was very clear on that. So this is not what I believe in. But I think media has to be self-critical of the role. So they have distorted it. It's partly because, you have to fight against this taboos, and when I was talking, fought against it. It's not the first time they're doing this. Because one time they came up with me on the street and they, burned my, what they call it, effigy and things like that. And they wanted to kill me wherever they find by beating, because I am against Bengali nationalists. How dare I am that I told that Mukti Juddhas was also, what they call it, terrorists. But I didn't say this anyway, but they compared, I simply say that in 1971, Pakistanis has also called the Mukti Juddhas terrorists. So those people who talk about right now a political activist, a terrorist, they have to understand, they're actually repeating the Pakistani psyche. And that's one. And then they have distorted this and they attack on me. So this media afterwards, and then they not only excluded me from the show. Also, government didn't want me to be in the show because the way I argue, so it creates a serious problem for them maybe. But also, they say that I have to be arrested in 24 hours. And in fact, for the 3 nights, televisions and the police and everybody was before my house. It was in the corner of a street. It was in there, and it was quite scary, of course. Scary in the sense because I was getting the feeling that they are not only interested in simply arresting me, they are interested in also, torture. Even this is a very common thing. And then, they told, many of the officers had told them, we're going to give me a good lesson. And including this media people was involved with it. They want to give me a good lesson. And they actually called one of my friend, she's a writer and she was a presenter in the television. That this time we're going to get you Guru and give him a good lesson. And because she was younger and like me, our relationship is very good. So this danger is still there. And you have to live with it. You have no other choice.
We were very much heartbroken when they got after Bahman.
Okay, after Bahman.
It was identity politics of Bangladesh.
Okay, I would think my immediate response to you would be that when you say identity, when you say identity politics, do you really think that Bangladeshi people are really suffering from identity dilemmas? But this is again very imagining, okay? That there is an identity crisis with the Bangladesh. I read a lot of reports.
By which I meant the shift from ethnic nationalism and language and ideology to something else.
I would say it's a class question, isn't it? Okay, it's not, the people of Bangladesh has all, look, because you raised this issue of the 1857 and all that, let's go back to the history that we did. I'll be able to make you understand what I mean by this. In 1850, from 1757 to 1857, Bengali Muslim didn't learn English. Okay, it's very important for us to really remember. And they started English only after they got the defeat in 1857. Okay, so this Brelovis came as a very important political idea that we have to learn English. But by this time, these 100 years, the new elite class has appeared among the Hindus, mostly in the upper caste Hindus. Okay, so there is already social conditions for communal identities in Bengal. Bankim Chandra came, Tagore came, all this kind of narrative, the construction of the Bengali identity through literatures and through arts and through the Calcutta-based activities, that kind of identity has really been constructed. Okay. So, but the Bengali Muslims with their struggle, they succeeded in to come up with Pakistan. Pakistan is not, this is something I always push this. Pakistan, all the time, how we listen, Pakistan came for Dijati Tattva, that means two-nation theory, as if, somebody wrote some two-nation theory and tomorrow Pakistan was informed. This is total nonsense, okay, all right. So you have to throw this kind of nonsense narrative from. Bengali Muslims fought for this. From 1857 they fought, the Muslims of India really fought against the colonialism, not for the identity, for against the colonialism, against the oppression which they really suffered. And then they succeeded in Pakistan because Bangladeshi Muslims, especially Bengali Muslims, supported Pakistan. Pakistan was accepted to them because this is a message to them, especially the peasantry, that it is emancipating from the colonial feudal relationship of the Mohajans or the Zamindars. So 47 is a very positive contribution to the life of the Bengali Muslims. So this is, we always deny. So we say that there is the identity politics, as if Bengali Muslim doesn't know whether these Bengalis are Muslim. Now what happens is this afterwards, 47, what happens is this, 1953, if you go to the history, 53 Bengal Tenancy Act when enacted. Okay, so the Zamindari system is gone. We don't have any Zamindari system. So land-based issues are not there anymore. Okay, but the memory of the 1857 is still there. Okay, now what happened? In 1952, that you see that when a language movement has came up. Okay. So language movement it came up. Nobody ever asked this question. The language movement was being led by urban middle class, few urban middle class. Okay, this is why the peasantry supported this demand for the urban middle class. This is not economic demand. This is nothing to do with their so-called identity. You speak Calcasian Bangla, okay? Because many of you are from the Sylhet, so your mother tongue is not Bangla. Your mother tongue is Sylhet. I am from Noakhali, my mother tongue is Noakhali. So this Calcasian Bengali, which has been constructed in colonial period, is not my mother tongue. So you can say that all the peasants fought for the right of their mother tongue. This is completely incorrect and this is a misreading of the history. What are we ignoring by creating that narrative of the Bengali language narrative is this? You have forgotten this Muslims when they, after 1953 or after the Pakistan, they were sending their kids to this school. For the 100 years they have learned English. Okay? They felt they're backward. They felt they're marginal. The Kolkata's babus is to look at them as calling them they are simply, Zolas, or someone coming from very low caste. So this simulation, carrying this simulation, they're sending their kids to the schools and the universities, okay? And then in 52 what happened is this, these kids was being killed. The student of the Bengali Muslims was being killed by Pakistan. That is a very sentimental issue to them since 1857, and if you remember this whole history, from 1757 to 1857 and 1850s onward. In 1922, Dhaka, 20 or 21, Dhaka University came into being. So Bengali Muslim only started learning English very recently. And then, you are killing them. the state police is killing these students, youths who are in this school. So this is where the alliance developed. So this is language movement, demand for the language, the state language, and this, this 100 years old sense of humiliation of the oppression, and then your aspiration to send your kids to the school and institutions and compete with, let's say, the other communities who collaborate with the colonial power and already well placed. Okay, this is, unless if you don't bring that part of history, then you create a Bengali nationalist narrative, and then we'll always end up saying that it is an identity crisis. Bengali Muslim has no identity crisis. They're quite clear that they are Bengali, they speak Bangla, Bangla is their language. So Tagore, they have no problem accepting Tagore. But they love Tagore. But Tagore doesn't represent ethos of the Bengali Muslims. And there's nothing wrong in this. It's not that Tagore became a minor poet because of that, because he came from a Hindu background, because he knew about the Hindu families, and he said that
he is what he is.
He is what he is, and he said that when the Bengali writers will write more about themselves, we will really have a true Bengali, language, universal Bengali language, where all the communities can participate and can engage. So this is very, very important. So we shouldn't, for example, read this history from the narrative of the identity crisis. I think I reject this methodology.
If you're coming from the West and you're going to Bangladesh, you tend to meet certain gatekeepers. One of them will be Aino Salesh Kendra, whose performance on this issue has been quite disappointing, but could have been expected. However, a list did go from Odikar to the organisation, and they, to your knowledge, have they handed that to the state, or is that still secure? What would be your commentary on the state of human rights work and activism in Bangladesh?
Now, I would say that Bangladesh, the human rights activity as we have done till today, to me it was fairly effective anyway, and there is certain expertise is really developed. And the expertise anyway, exactly the way you are asking me the question, that means really knowing the fact, not that, distorting the fact, and just, do you work on the basis of the facts and things like that. Ainu Kendra's problem is because they have a very partisan position. That's one of the difficulties, because they are Ainu Kendras, because they're one of the executives. She is involved with a movement against the Islamists. In their eyes, they're fundamentalists, and she is a defender of the secularism. So obviously, the way she looked, there is a division within Ainu Kendra by now. Within Ainu Kendra, there are also activists who think that this position of Ainu Kendra is not really right, and we have to really act as a human rights organization, and then we have to find out the truth, the real figures, what is happening. So this is, this is important. But Odikar, because the damage of Odikar, which the government succeeded to impart on Odikar, is quite a serious concern to many of us.
Yourself, Mahmoud Rahman, and many others, I imagine, were liaising, communicating, in dialogue. Could you give us a flavour of the dynamics of that?
No, first of all, Shaprachatra didn't happen simply as a spontaneous movement. That's what's very wrong. Many people think that Shaprachatra happened just because spontaneous sittings happen like this. So Mahmoud Rahman played a very vital role. So without Mahmoud Rahman, I don't think we could really get a Shaprachatra. Okay, all right. And then you can criticize Mahmoud Rahman that he was taking a very Islamist, very conventional, Islamist position, and he was trying to, his contribution was in a way of constituting a kind of a Muslim subjectivity. Okay, all right. So he has been criticized by the mainstream so-called secular media as well, because he is provoking the language, he is provoking these Islamists to come against these so-called atheists. And then in Amardesh you may find some evidences for that. But that is, I think if you really seriously look into as a social movement, as understood Bangladeshi society, I think we will be in the wrong track looking into it. Amardesh obviously contributed a role in in constituting the Muslim subjectivity because Muslims felt they are oppressed. And I think that position was fairly right, I think. When you, from a modernist narrative, in a secularist narrative, you don't like Islam anyway. You don't like anything that when a particular community feels they are oppressed. And deny even the liberal right to come up on the street and articulate their voices. You are denying those kinds of things. So those people who criticize that, so they, first of all, they were not consistent with their own politics, their own belief systems. Okay, we believe in liberal ideas. These people have the right to talk about it. And we can say we don't agree with you. Okay, what you're demanding, we don't agree with you. But you cannot suppress this, freedom of expression, which so-called liberalism all the time say, the ground that we believe in, and the freedom of expression, things like that. So the constitution of the Muslim subjectivity, the role played by Amardesh and played by Mahathir Rahman was very positive. This is the only weapon they had to fight back the assault of the state and assault of the urban middle class, against the narrative. They don't have any other ideological weapon in their hand except talking about Islam and raising the flag of as a Muslim.
I think many people sympathise with Mahmoud Rahman and wish him freedom. Would you say that was a priority to get him out?
It is definitely a priority. I mean, if you believe in a liberal ideology, then it is a responsibility anyway. You simply can't say that you have to have a freedom of speech only for Mahfuz Anam and not for Mahathir Rahman, or Mahathir Rahman and not for Mahathir Rahman. You can't. If Mahathir Rahman says something wrong, you go and ideologically fight against his position things. And then secularists has provoked the Muslims for the last 42 years. Every day it is a provocation against the Muslims. Every day it is an insult to his, the belief of the people of Bangladesh. In every way. Okay. So you have simply because of your dress you have been humiliated. You have been looked down upon because you are coming from the madrasa people. So this is I would say a very important in a way. First time this marginal community who has been forced to stay on the margin of society came into the arena of the mainstream arena and registered their voice. And they registered the voice by the only voice they knew. Only voice they knew is Islam. What other voice they had? We never went to them, we never told them about anything, we never actually talked about Islam with them. We never talked about that, how even Islam is, the position of Islam with regard to justice, with regard to social and others. We never discussed with this sort of thing. So they have developed on their own. So me and Mahathir Rahman unconditionally supported the Hifazati movement. And you know that I have written on them, and I was the main one who was writing in Bengali. And actually I succeeded in mobilizing opinion of the secular camp as well. Because within the secular camp, there are people who are also open-minded. It's not that, because they go to Shabak and they become some kind of very fetishized, they don't carry fetishized ideas. So these are the significance of the Shabak. So I think when you say that we have forgotten, I don't think we have forgotten. I think we will come back, not necessarily in the same form. We will come back in a different form.
Okay.
Not necessarily the same form. We will come back in a different form.
Okay. If we can, that's really good for the narrative build-up. If we could become a bit more technocratic onto the gruesome detail.
Okay.
To your best information, what happened that morning?
I mean that on the 5th and 6th open morning. No, in the 5th and 6th moment, the operation from the government side was definitely very brutal. And the figures what say Odhikar was giving, at least the numbers which Odhikar has said that we have went back with all these names is correct. And the numbers of people, how many people really killed and maimed and also been injured, it is difficult to ascertain.
How much Odikar say?
61.
61. So it's difficult to ascertain. Odikar said that this is what we got right now in our hand and it's still continuing.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, it is very clear they say that. Then what happened, the government couldn't even tolerate that one because in the meantime all the media was saying nothing happened at that night. So this 61 has become very intolerable for the regime. You see, that's why Adil was being picked up. Okay, me and Adil was having having a dinner at one house next to his apartment, and then he went back to his kids. His kids was falling asleep because it was getting late for them, and then he picked up just before his own house. So we have seen, it's very interesting that none of these so-called liberal papers stood by Odikar's side, that you simply cannot pick up. And then he was saved in a certain way, given that we have a culture of enforced disappearance. Because fortunately we knew it immediately in 10 and 15 minutes when it will be picked up. And we immediately mobilized press that gave the news that Odikar Adil Rahman had really picked up because we have been lost by him by now.
On the operation itself, can you tell who the main movers in it were? How previously it was planned?
You mean to say, do I know the people who are involved in the government side? No, I don't have the full information because it's very difficult to know, because even though we know, even though I know I can't prove it, I don't have the evidence, it's very difficult. We know that these are the people who are really involved in it. And there are many rumors as well that in that night it was not only the RAB and not only the police, not only the media, there's some Indian agents were also involved in this whole operation. But these are all more or less, at least to me, is not substantiated with evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. So, but it was quite surprising how government could have mobilized so quickly such a big operation. It was a very big operation in there. So it's difficult to say, but definitely from the government side, they were very much ready for a massacre, and they did that, without any kind of they didn't think what would be the consequences of it.
Could you describe your day, the 5th and the 6th? How was it for you?
5th was my day was, and even for the whole 5th, we are definitely trying to maintain our communication with the friends who are organizing this whole Shapra Chattur that time, and then also trying to convince, mostly I was busy trying to convince the BNP leaders that it is time for them to come forward, really help support them, this movement. So you know that within the BNP there is two tendencies, quite clear tendencies. One is secularist tendencies, very strong, very strong tendency. And there is another one that they are our allies, so they deserve some kind of support. To the Islamists, our allies, so some kind of support to them. So it took too long for them to take a very concrete positions with regard to Shapra Chattur.
I believe they had substantial manpower in the city for their own strikes.
Yes and no, both. BNP is not a kind of an organization that would has the capacity to confront army or a state Divya Hasina has constructed with all kind of legal and firepower. You see, because she is all the time ready to hit. She will not hesitate that if you think that you are really going to challenge her, she is definitely going to hit. And from her perspective, from Sheikh Hasina's perspective, when she did this brutal operation like the Shapra Chattur, and she knew very well, she wanted to give a lesson to the Islamists that this is how you are going to be treated if you want to challenge the government. Because why they did it? For the very simple reason. And the reason is very simple, is that there is a tremendous amount of popular support for the Shapra Chattur. And if it would have succeeded for the morning, and Ahmed Shafi could have come in the morning for the dua, so it would be a massive, manifestation of the people. All the poor people in the Dhaka city who are working as maids or darwans or drivers, they would have joined with them. So because the class nature of the Shapta Chatra was so obvious that you could see that already the masters had started to ally with them. Because partly they thought the religion is the glue where they can really ally. And second is somehow the Hifazat, the Qawmi Madrasa, has an image of a class in Bangladesh, even to the general people. See, because these are the madrasa that take care of the yatim people and orphan people, and they are the one who, actually take care of the poor and the marginal. So that image isn't there. So Hasina had to crack down on it. She had no other choice to really do that. But for the BNP, it is that the BNP has missed an opportunity. It's a very important opportunity for them to be making an alliance with the Islamists, and that tension, ambiguity, that still is really continuing. And sometimes we hear they are not going to keep the alliance with Jamaat Islami or keep the alliances with the Hifazat and others. So BNP would rather develop their secular image more than the image which they had as a party supporting the Shapta Chatras and things like that. And the support which you saw from Khaleda Zia for the Shapta Chatra, my feeling is that it's more or less her individual wisdom or her individual understanding, whatever it is. Somehow she felt that these people are important, they are her constituency, that's maybe one reason. But also my feeling was, because as far as I know about her, that she definitely felt that there's something interesting, change is happening in the society as well, and it's important for her to be by her side. But within BNP there is nobody who can articulate this support within the narrative of the BNP politics.
There were some very jealous sounding reports that a Marxist had taken over the BNP sometime in March.
It's all right.
Not naming names. There is a lead. There are leads as to what was done with the bodies. There's the reports, hospital-based reports of bodies being taken away.
Dump trucks. Dump trucks, isn't it?
Dumper trucks. There are reports of the diggers in the garbage dumps digging holes.
Right.
Investigation, whenever it happens, do you think these leads are promising?
I think these are promising. That's number promising. And secondly also, because, myself involved in directly with this political turmoil or this political struggle. So my position was simply that there should be an independent body to investigate. And the claim what Hafsa Chattar is saying, that yes, nearly 2,000 to 2,500 people really killed, we have to take it as they are claiming. And it is the responsibility of the government to go and investigate and say, no, that's really wrong. I think that's obviously, for the 42 years. And then some of the government tells us, why can't you come up with a list? Okay, you are terrorizing the whole, madrasa people, Hefazatis or these Islamic leaders, and then you want them, nobody can even stay in their own home, and you want them to come up with, to make up a list who has been ill or who has been, injured. And it's also dangerous anyway, even though we have a list. How can we publish it? Because you are actually going to, torture these families. It's not possible. You can do it as Odikar's position was, this is not a human rights organization can do, because they have a responsibility to these families who share the information to them. So, but at the same time, most important part is this, in 42 years, we haven't succeeded in making a list of the 30 lakh people killed by the Pakistan army. How we expect that, just in 1 week, you should come up with a list of how many people really been killed. So this is, I think there is a politics of the numbers anyway.
Yeah,
So,
numbers
which
game.
I understand, yeah.
We were quite shocked that Odikar didn't follow up.
Odikar couldn't follow up, and I don't want to be apologetic, but I want to say it very clearly, because the kind of repression Odikar faced, and literally because none of their funds has been released, the organization literary can function without any kind of fund. It was almost impossible for the Odhikar to really follow it up, given the political repression they are going through. The case has not been, withdrawn. Okay, so it's not possible for Odhikar to do that. But if you want to do that, it should be followed up for an investigation. My position will be very different. I think that it is not the task of Odhikar anymore. We have to have an independent, investigators, because Odhikar has somehow been portrayed by the government and the opposition and many of the medias as an organization sympathetic to Shapra, sympathetic to the Islamists. So it's better that we have an independent investigation and follow this up. Well, Odhikar can support this.
Okay.
We'll talk about came on the press that the state attacked the madrasas the days after. You have snippets in the press, but no one talks about it. It hasn't come up in any reports or anything like that. That actually state security forces went into Hattazari and a few other madrasas with live ammunition, and some people got killed.
Right.
Do you know
what happened?
What happened? Or
No, one thing is this, this in Lalka Madrasa I don't know much about what actually happened, because this is a very big problem, because for me it's a very big problem as well, because to get the information to really go to these madrasas when this kind of repression goes on. But my feeling is this, madrasa was all the time under the surveillance of the state agents. And then in many areas they will they themselves create problems like this, that you can, just putting some grenades and these and things, or some kind of, what they call it, explosive, and then you say these are the jungis and their activity. It's very easy for the state agencies. Now, the unfortunate part of this, that we don't have a very strong supporter, a strong team, the people who can really do the investigations. And there is, first of all, there is, even to have a very small team to do this kind of work, you also have at least some minimum amount of resource. It's very difficult even in Bangladesh to mobilize it. And even you mobilize that resource, sometimes your priorities shifts, that whether you will, because to what extent you can really do the campaign, to what extent you need to really have unearthed this information. So you also need a professional journalism to really do that. There is a lack in this as well, because obviously in these cases you can't be simply come up with a report which is tinted with emotion and partisan. So that's not very useful at the same time. So there is a serious weakness in this area.
Focusing on the primary body victims of this massacre, to your knowledge, what is the state of the victims and their families?
A very big state. Many of the families will still follow them up. They still need support, and many of them are, they have lost some of them lost their eyes and things. And it's sad anyway that, say if you just compare with Rana Plaza, say for example, okay, I'm not to compare Rana Plaza, a very tragic incident. But there is a sympathy, national sympathy for this, for the government, international sympathy for this. But here, these people have suffered, but there is no national sympathy, neither from the state, neither globally. Because these are the people are known as, they are jungis, you see, they are the jihadis. They have done a very big crime because they join in Shaprachat. So in that way, this is a very sad situation, and it's very difficult to even raise fund and to really support them. Still then, this is going on, but it's not much for them.
How can we not make the same mistakes as the Nirmal Committee? As the Nirmal Committee. How can we not make the same mistakes that the Nirmal Committee did? The Ghatak Dalal Nirmal
Ghatak Dalal Committee.
In our response to this state crime and schizophrenia, how do we not repeat the same mistakes of the Nirmal Committee?
What mistake Nirmal Committee did in your eyes? I honestly, I still don't understand.
Oh, okay. Generating the proto-Shahbag, you could say.
Okay.
a hate-based narrative
Mm.
that provided just a horse for secularism to ride on, betrayed victims and real stories and diversity.
Okay,
of
so it's a
stories.
narrative of the victims, and then actually, is it that what you're mentioning about?
I see what's happened with the war crimes trials,
Mm-hmm.
a little aside from what I said,
Mm.
the impossibility of knowing what really happened,
Exactly right.
right? And their recklessness with wanting to know what really happened,
Right.
and the clear ideological agenda, an objectionable
Right,
ideological agenda of exclusion and
Right,
elimination.
All right. Okay.
In generating the feeling and the mood and the activism on this Shapla issue and post-Shapla issues, what are your recommendations to avoid
My
getting into
I think
this?
I understand. I think you have raised a very, very valid and very excellent point. I really, as I say. Of course, we don't copy at all what Khatam Dalali Noor Committee has really done. And then also, we don't, and I would also be careful about not to harbor the politics of hatred, because that is completely counterproductive. I think that your efforts or your group's efforts to understand what exactly happened has a very, very important political meaning in this, that we really have to know what exactly happened on this, fateful night of 5th May. This is very, very important. But my own feeling is this: I don't think that, unlike Ghatuk Dalal, Islamists, even though in some of the languages, and you can see that there is a language of hatred, of course, but generally among the Islamists, they are not any deep-seated hatred against, that you have to do the politics of the victim as such. And they demand the politics of justice, which is different from this, that you really have to do justice to this. And then they are not good. And then this is the reason also you raised the questions earlier about the Hifazat, that Hifazat has died down or things like that. Okay, that's what it is. But I think that most important part is this: the way now, as I know the many of the leaders, as I know the many of the people coming from Islamic background or the common Madrasa background, they don't have a hatred in the sense that we see Nirmul terminating your opposition. They don't have that kind of thing, but they definitely demand a justice, what happened on the 5th May. So I think I really appreciate that you have thought about it. So we must not fall into that kind of, what do you call it? It's Nirmul mentality.
18 months on, is Shapla Chowdhury forgotten?
I don't know. I don't know why you say forgotten. I don't think Shapla Chowdhury has been forgotten. It depends on which class and from which perspective you're talking about. My analysis would be something like this. Number one is this: there is certain inevitability in the defeat of the Shapla Chowdhury as an event. Shapla Chowdhury is not the way it developed. Okay, I personally didn't see this as a movement that is definitely going to be successful. There is some kind of Islamic Sunni revolution in Bangladesh. That is not what I looked at the Shapla Chowdhury. I don't see the Shapla Chowdhury as something which is simply appearing against Shahbaz, for that matter. Okay, all right. But interestingly, Shapla Chowdhury is victorious in a couple of points. Number one, it has changed the ethos of the Bangladeshis generally. Whether you are in Shahbaz, whether you are supporting the Qawmi Madrasa or the Islamists, it has changed the ethos. It has fundamentally challenged the narrative of the Bengali nationalism. Number one. Number three, it has brought back the history of Islam in the subcontinent, particularly the history of the Deobandis in the subcontinent and in particularly in Bangladesh. Okay? The Qawmi Madrasa was a very marginal institution in Bangladesh. That when you see that people are these people who we actually forgot about them for quite a long time. You say Koi Madrasa, who cares about Koi Madrasa? Etim Bacha, orphans isn't there. Some medieval Maulana is teaching them with the Darshan Nizami, very old kind of curriculum. So nobody bothered with it. Say they have always been seen as a weight for a society and as a hindrance to the progress to the civilization. That was the image of the Koi Madrasa. Generally, I think it's not only, and in the eyes of the Condoleezza Rice, these are the factories of terrorism. This is where we saw the Qawmi Madrasa. But here you see the Qawmi Madrasa, first time, this particularly and along with them Islamists, succeeded in making a link with the community. This is a tremendous victory for the Islamists in Bangladesh. I mean, if you just see what's going to happen in the coming years, then this Shapra Chattar is historical. Okay, and their sacrifice is historical. I see the sacrifice almost in a certain way of 1857, but in a very different way. 1857 was a failure in a way. The Sepoy Mutiny was against the British colonial power directly. Shapra Chattar never said we are going to overthrow Sheikh Hasina. You see, many people always say it is a failure because they forgot the terms of the movement. Shapra Chattar was saying, this Qawmi Madrasa was saying, or this Hefazatis were saying that, okay, all right, that we are defending the honor of our Prophet because we are insulting my Prophet. We are not against Sheikh Hasina. We want these people who are insulting us. So we want that the state takes some action against them. By this very proposition, they are not denying their new liberal state. You see, it is not a revolutionary movement as such, apparently from the modern notion of revolution, which I don't accept anyway as an important category, as if Islamic revolution is not a revolution. But the modern category of the revolution, that it has to be directed against the state. Okay, all right. So Shapra Chattar was not like this. So Shapra Chattar has changed the mental geography of the Bangladeshi community. Middle class, upper middle class, oppressed, all of them. And then, fourthly, Shapra Chattar, first time in Bangladesh's history after 1971, brought back the Islam question as a political question. So these are, I think, the tremendous victory. I mean, I don't think anybody has forgotten at all the Shapra Chattar. If you say it is people has forgotten, then we might have seen the Shapra Chattar from a very narrow perspective. That is, I'm not, I will not go for that. And secondly, that Hefazatis has made alliances with the Awami League, so they are not doing any movement anymore. They are all divided. There are many kinds of feud among them as leaders. So these are some kind of very middle class kind of propaganda. And then, yeah, true, maybe. But Shapra Chattar never said that we are here to overthrow the Hasina's regime and make an Islamic revolution. That is not the project.
As a little add-in to that, if you were to watch the social media stream coming out of some parts of London, it territorialised that protest as bring down the government. Many of us spoken against that.
So many of us were involved with the Shapra.
If the regime was looking for an excuse, it was provided by some of the more reckless on social media.
Every day it is a provocation against the Muslims. Every day it is an insult to the belief of the peoples of Bangladesh. In every way. Okay. So you have simply because of your dress you have been humiliated. You have been looked down upon because you are coming from the madrasa people. So this is I would say a very important in a way. First time this marginal community who has been forced to stay on the margin of the society came into the arena of the mainstream arena and registered their voice. And they registered the voice by the only voice they knew. Only voice they knew is Islam. What other voice they had? We never went to them, we never told them about anything, we never actually talked about Islam with them, we never talked about that, how even Islam is, the position of Islam with regard to justice, with regard to social and others, we never discussed with this sort of thing. So they have developed on their own. So me and Muhammad Rahman unconditionally supported the Hifazati movement. And you know that I've written on them, and I was the main one who was writing in Bengali. And actually I succeeded in mobilizing opinion of the secular camp as well. Because within the secular camp, there are people who are also open-minded. It's not that, because they go to Shabak and they become some kind of very fetishized, they don't carry fetishized ideas. So these are the significance of the Shabak. So I think when you say that we have forgotten, I don't think we have forgotten. I think we will come back, not necessarily the same form.
Dark day, we spent time with him. And so you're going to go back to Desh, and what protections are there for you? What protections can we produce here? Because if you're of non-establishment politics, there's no airlift, there's nothing.
No, look, this is, it's difficult to say that whether because you have to live with the support of the people. I don't think people like us has any other option like Muhammad Rahman. Like say for example Muhammad Rahman, if he comes out right now, his life will be in danger because he has the capacity to mobilize things. Okay, it's not only he is an editor of a paper, he has a capacity to mobilize. He was an advisor to the government on the energy. He's an engineer. He's a lot of capacity in there. So government is definitely, after many of us. It's not because we are writing. That's not why they are that we are writing something. They are after because they know that we are in the movement. We are involved in the society, we are involved in different kind of movements, and we're also explaining to the masses what does it really mean. So now in Bangladesh you'll find a lot of young people with very progressive left background, very sympathetic to the Hifazat from the class point of view. Let's say for example, they are quite aware of the war on terror narrative and the whole politics of it. So it's fairly large. We also conduct a study circle every Thursday. So I can see the young people how much they're interested to know more and to be more open. So they know that this is a threat to them. And I think that at least I've heard from many of the governments as well. I think that they see me as a danger because they see me as a bridge between the secularists and the Islamists against this fascist state. So the way they succeed in separating them, I break this separation. Because like say yesterday, if you've heard the speech I gave it to
Water Lily.
Sorry.
I had to go to babysit.
So my main focus was I make a distinction between the Muslims and Islam. I said, as a Muslim, you're oppressed, you have a very good reason to ask for anything for the Muslims. But to me, Islam is not for the Muslims, Islam is for all humanity. And I am looking for a narrative so that I can articulate it to other who are not non-Muslims as Islam is for you as well. And because Islam has a philosophy, I don't believe there is anything called Islamic philosophy, but there is a philosophy. If Hegel can write a book called Phenomenology of the Spirit, explaining the Protestant Christianism, I do have a right to write about another philosophy, explaining the truth of Islam can also be expressed in the philosophical language. All right, this is very important. And then I think that we will do a big mistake if we say our struggle is for the Muslims. And then if you struggle for the Muslim, then today and tomorrow you have to be ready that you are going to get a drone attack. Because that is not our way of really dealing with it. You have to convince the people, you have to tell the other people that look, I am from Islam and I am very proud of, partly because this religion, except Isa as my prophet, except Musa as my prophet, I am the most tolerant. I have 130,000 prophets, and every community got their leaders, blessed by Allah and things like that. So it is I see my task is to emancipate the Muslims from the narrowness and from their sometimes falling into the play of politics of hatred, which is not going to lead us anywhere because we'll suffer more. Secondly, to make them proud that Islam has indeed proposed certain fundamental propositions philosophically, which is, is very distinctly different than Greco-Christian premises. So the coming world is Islamic one. It is not going to be the Muslim world, as the present world is the Greco-Christian world. Okay, this is what I usually argue. I think this is happening because Western society has failed to solve the answer. Many issues of moral question, many issues of spirituality, social organizations, and then they have miserably